Okay, we're going to continue with our um, work in Frumpkin. The last video clip last week, we covered the introduction to language. Today, we're going to be looking at what is grammar. Hmm. Yeah, now, I know that I personally dislike grammar, or I disliked it in school. I did not like it at university, where we studied syntax, which is um, a formal field in linguistics, and you study the deep structures of grammar, which was incredibly boring for me. Uh, if you use Google and you use Google Translate, you'll notice that you can translate any language into another language, and your results are 50% of the time they're right or close to what the other language uh, would would be in terms of translation. However, you'll notice that sometimes it doesn't make any sense at all. This is because we haven't quite mastered machine translation yet. This uses a mathematical formula for grammar where they reduce sentences into mathematical structures that allows them to translate. That's how the computer calculates what a word or and so on would be in another language. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But we're going to focus on a brief understanding of what is grammar. So if I asked you what is grammar, you'd probably tell me, oh, it's like how you put together a sentence and where your verbs go and your objects and your subject and so on. And you'd be right. We're going to focus on some aspects, some general aspects. So here you can see descriptive grammars, right? So we're going to be looking at what the word grammar actually means, right? So grammar is broken down. We talked about having the rules for the units of language, right? So particularly when you look at things like phonology, the phonology is what is called the combination of sounds, right, into words. As you can see here, combination of sounds into words. So by putting together a group of sounds according to certain rules, you have words that are formed in sound. Like you now, as you're listening to this lecture, you're listening to the sounds I'm making. And those sounds, when they are grouped together, make words, right? Which allow you to then uh, understand what I'm saying. But first, you have to know what sounds I'm making in order to know which words I'm speaking, right? So when you know that, then the word formation is called morphology, right? We're looking at word formation. Word formation is morphology. They also have rules for combining words into phrases, etc., and phrases into sentences. We call this syntax, right? Syntax. Um, then there are rules for assigning meaning, semantics, right? Then the grammar, together with a mental dictionary, is called a lexicon. Okay, you may have to go through and read this again slowly on your own time or watch the clip again. But basically, phonology is the sounds, the rules for combination of sounds. Morphology, the formation of words, right? The rules for formation of words. And then those words into phrases and those phrases into sentences, we call syntax. Okay? And then, of course, the mental pictures and so on that you have in your head, lexicons. Right? Now, moving on, we're going to see two kinds of grammar, right? We're going to look at something called a descriptive grammar. Okay, I'll just basically tell you what this means. Basically, just there are two kinds: descriptive grammar and something called prescriptive grammar, right? Which we'll cover later. But first, let me tell you about descriptive grammar. So, descriptive grammar here is explains very simply in one sentence. Here, it does not tell you how you should speak. Okay, it tells you how you do speak, right? So in other words, a descriptive grammar doesn't tell you, for example, I ain't never gonna go there, right? So you can't say I ain't and never are two double negatives, so we don't use those in a sentence. It is used in some communities. I ain't got no money, right? Some people use a double negative, but in proper English, you shouldn't, right? So the descriptive grammar doesn't tell you how you should speak, but it does tell you how you do speak, right? So it's describing how you speak. It's not telling you how to speak, right? We call this descriptive grammar. Now, the explanations can get very complicated, but that's basically what it is. So when you're looking for a definition, your definition for descriptive grammar is here, right? This section, descriptive grammar. Okay. Okay. So then the opposite of this is called prescriptive grammar, right? Prescriptive grammar. Now this is more where they tell you how to speak, how you should speak. And this is basically related to money and how much money a certain dialect has or variation, etc., which we won't get into at this stage, but we will say this. There's a long description here. They talk about the Renaissance and so on. So basically, we have also prestige dialect, which we'll get to in a bit. So for prescriptive grammars, they tell you how you should speak. Like you should say, with whom were you speaking? And it's, there's a whole bunch of rules that you should say and you shouldn't say, like um, that basically tell you what you should say. We call that prescription, as in prescribe, right? Um, Next up, we have prestige dialect. Prestige dialect is basically it's spoken by groups of people that are in positions of power or from wealthy countries. If you go to um, Asia, you'll notice first that the American dialect is the most prestigious dialect. Many schools want American teachers to teach them American English and expressions because they watch it on Hollywood movies, they listen to it in rap music, they listen to it in popular music that they have. Their culture has some aspects of American cross culture crossing over. So the prestige dialect, they see glamorous Hollywood and actors and actresses, their favorite actresses and so on, and the pop songs that they listened to when they were growing up. So this prestige dialect is associated with that, which is basically what people want to learn. And it's previously it was the British English, and these days it's more American English, right? Okay, moving on. You can read through the section on prescriptive grammar. It's pretty straightforward. Um, the teaching of grammar, learning grammar is difficult when you're an adult. It's better to learn it when you're young, for some mysterious reason. Um, Now, universal grammar. Now, earlier we spoke about Google Translation. That's how Google Translation works. It works on the assumption that there is a common grammar that underlies all languages, and that if you tap into it, you'll be able to translate into any language, right? Um, so basically, uh, all languages have a grammar, and they believe that there is a mother grammar, so to speak, right? Um, okay, so you do not need to go to sign languages, and you can skip all of these sections, um, and you can just go down to the section that deals with language and thought. Now, the language and thought here, we look at Sapir-Whorf, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, right, which was done with this linguist Edward Sapir and his student Benjamin Whorf, right? So Sapir-Whorf, basically they claim that mm, your language that you speak, right, determines how we perceive and think about the world. So how you think about the world is related to the language that you use. I know that's very harsh when you think about it, but they do give you some examples, and to a certain extent it is kind of true. Although I see language as an indicator or an expression of deeper constructs, but we're not going to go into that. Then another form of this hypothesis is linguistic relativism, which talks about the different categories, and they use the example of colors, right? So the Navajo and the Russians have different words for different colors, and they experience it differently, right? And their languages also express it differently. But if you think about it, when you're looking at language and thought, right? Which one comes first? If I asked you what comes first, language or thought, what would you say? Would you say language or would you say thought? I mean, do you think in a language? Which language do you dream in? Maybe you have multiple languages that you speak, right? Which language do you speak? If you see someone very attractive and you go, ooh, he's nice or she's nice, did you think that in another language, or did you think it in your native language? It's something for us to think about, right? So this basically concludes our section um, on language and introduction to language, basic introduction. So I'd like for you to go to read through the whole chapter again. Focus on the areas that I focused on. You can skip the sections I skipped as well, or if you'd like to read it for your own development and for your own interest, please go ahead and do that. You are most welcome to. But focus on the sections that I focused on, and you should be fine. Okay, I hope you have a good week. Keep working on your readings and watching your video clips and so on and so on. All right, God bless. Thank you.